Where to start today? I was recently featured as a part of an episode on the Inside Flap podcast. I've mentioned them before, but now you gotta go check them out. Your host, Ivan Wayne, got to call in and share some background story about the NoCo. Plus, I got to plug a book I recently read and thoroughly enjoyed. If you aren't already familiar, The Inside Flap is a book-centered podcast for readers and friends of all kinds. Check them out. They record and live in Littleton, Colorado, just down the road from us. That's The Inside Flap. I'm on the episode titled Mountain Lions, NoCo, and Soul Food. Welcome to the NoCo. I'm your host, Ivan Wayne. Ready to hear a podcast about another podcast recorded between two podcasters? I hope so. Our guest today comes from Loveland, Colorado, born and raised. He started a podcast to share human experiences so that his listeners may relate, connect, and empathize with his guests. Nick Church has invited a plethora of life stories on his show already. Plus, me, your very own host, Ivan Wayne, got to be his guest for episode 9. So without further ado, here he is, Nick Church of the Take 'Em to Church podcast. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the NoCo. This time, we're actually on the technology of our guest, who is also a podcaster who also lives in northern Colorado. So his name is Nick Church, and first of all, thank you, Nick, for having me in your home.
No, pleasure for coming by and stopping by the humble abode.
Absolutely. And I got to be featured on the Take 'Em to Church podcast, which is a podcast that Nick runs. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to him so he can tell you all about it.
Yeah, so like Ivan said, the Take 'Em to Church podcast is a sometimes weekly, sometimes not podcast where just depends on scheduling that people, interesting, big or small, I bring them on to kind of share their experiences and their life stories so that the community or whoever wants to listen to it can share in kind of the universal human experience a little bit and, gather maybe information about careers or lifestyles or passions. So that was kind of the main focus there was I wanted to just have conversation with interesting people. So, that was the main goal.
And the name is Take 'Em to Church. And
Yes.
I'll admit, when I first found it, I was looking for podcasts that originated in Colorado so that I could collaborate. And I thought yours would be religious in nature.
No, it is not religious. It is my last name. So that's where the church aspect comes from is, it would have been like Take Me to Church or something crazy, but then I get that Hosier song sung to me all the time, right. And I was like, I can't do it anymore.
Right.
I'm over it.
And the phrase Take 'Em to Church typically means like educating people or like, I'm going to take your butt to church and you're going to figure this out.
Oh, absolutely. That was kind of the whole goal behind wanting to do the name there was it's a pun in and of itself in a sense that it kind of means something. Plus, it's better than just calling it like the Nick Church podcast hour, I feel like.
And another layer of interest is when I first looked at your show, the logo is a vicious, ferocious tiger face.
Yes.
How does this fit into Take 'Em to Church, Nick Church podcast?
So originally the logo that you'll see on the older material, there's kind of this like reddish blue logo that was originally developed that I built just as kind of like a placeholder. But I knew I wanted some kind of symbology or something that stood out that was kind of like unique to what I wanted to do. And like I have a tiger tattoo on my body, and tigers have been a huge influence in my life for a long time. I think they represent a lot of powerful things, and they have a lot of kind of Eastern meaning and things. And they just embody a lot of who I am, like the courage, but the cunning and the wisdom that comes along with them. They're all over this apartment too, if you look around. So yeah, just kind of figured that was the way to go.
Not real tigers, but we are joined by 3 cats.
There are three cats in this
who
apartment.
were about to get into a tussle a little bit earlier, but it seems things have leveled out.
Yeah, everybody's asleep now. We're good to go.
I never thought about this as I was growing up, but one thing that sticks out to me now as an adult is that house cats, if you were to blow them up in size, they are jaguars, tigers, lions. There's no mistaking. You look at a Pomeranian, a poodle, a Chihuahua, you don't see a wolf.
No, you don't.
You don't see a miniature wolf in a corgi, right?
Right.
When you blow it up size. If you saw a wolf-sized corgi, I think that'd be even more terrifying than a wolf.
That would be horrifying, like with the stubby legs and everything as they like run towards you. I don't know, like I'd be like, oh my God, you're so cute, but please don't rip my face off.
Yeah. It's like strangely still fast somehow with the stubby legs.
Oh yeah.
But it's strange seeing house cats and you see the behavior. Then you watch like Blue Planet. You see a big cat and you're like, there's not much difference except for size here.
Well, they do the same thing. They groom themselves. They like roll around and, hang out and bat each other. And, you add 50 pounds to a house cat and that thing would probably kill you in your sleep.
Right. Yeah. And so the tiger symbol has meant something to you for a while now. Do you remember when that first started coming about, or was it like a childhood favorite?
I loved them growing up as a kid. They were always my favorite animal, but I had this like weird fascination with them. I wanted to be a zoologist when I was younger. I wanted to like travel to Asia and study them because I just thought they were so cool and they have so much deep kind of religious meaning and a lot of like Eastern symbology and like Buddhism and Hinduism and all of the cultures out there. That these really prominent, like powerful figures, and they actually represent there's tapestries that are hanging up in here that I've gotten from Buddhist temples in like Hawaii, and they bring a lot of culture over from representing like yin and yang and like the good and the evil in people. And so I just figured it would be something that, it embodies me. And it looks really cool. Like, shout out to Chris France, the artist that designed it. He's an awesome guy. And that was just what the symbolism is for now. So we'll see what it evolves into as time progresses.
That's cool. And you are a native to Northern Colorado.
I am lifelong, since day one. The inception of me is a lifelong time. I've lived other places, but no, this has always been considered home for me.
Yeah, NoCo is home. But your podcast, anyone can enjoy it. So if you're from Northern Colorado, you can enjoy it, but it's accessible to anyone in the world.
Absolutely. I've had listeners that I have family and friends that are all over the globe. I have a lot of Navy friends, so that they listen to it. East Coast, out in, I've had people in Australia that I'm friends with, or like South Korea. So it's a pretty universally enjoyed because it focuses more on like the experiences of people. And I think that's kind of a universal understood truth that everybody can get something out of it.
Yeah. So what brought you to start your own podcast here?
So I actually started with another podcast. It's the Decompression Session was the first podcast that I did. And that podcast came about because there were many nights that I've had, one of those like drunken conversations with your friends, or just a conversation period where you're laughing hysterically. You go like really deep into some philosophical thing at like 4 a.m. and you go, man, oh man, I wish somebody could have captured that and someone else could have heard that. So that was what that evolved into. And then that spiraled into, I want to interview people and talk to people because I was inspired by the experience I had doing it, and that just evolved into this podcast.
How many episodes of the Decompression Session did you run?
There are 6 up currently, and we're working on doing a couple more. It's shifted to being a much more kind of subject-based podcast, so it takes a little bit more time for us to prep on topics and things. Like the last episode we recorded a couple of weeks back focused a lot on like artificial intelligence and talking about that stuff and deep diving into what that concept means. And yeah, I think we're getting ready to do an episode on like gene modification and talking about like CRISPR and those kinds of things.
Interesting. So you're sitting down with the same people on each episode and kind of walking through and talking about something that's very interesting.
Yeah. My buddy Kyle and I actually do it. So he's the co-host on that one, and him and I just sit down. He's a pretty intellectual guy, and we just rattle on and talk.
Very cool. And then now you've switched gears with the Take 'Em to Church podcast and you're interviewing people. How's that experience been? Just a total switch of gears.
I enjoy it a lot because the Decompression Session, when you listen to that podcast, it's the same 2 guys every episode. It's Kyle and I rattling off stuff about, this or that or the other. And so we have a really good like repertoire together and we can talk a lot. I find it a lot more compelling now to want to talk to other people. I've always enjoyed, having these discussions with other people and talking about people's experiences. So I love doing this stuff, and it's been a little bit of a change because now I'm gearing more of like questions towards people and like trying to garner information rather than just, shooting back and forth the usual banter between a friend.
Yeah, and how do you figure out who to have on the show?
That is a great question. It just kind of depends. I'm trying to build the audience right now, but I look at people that I know in my life personally right now that have incredible stories or that run really cool businesses or have awesome passions, and I go, hey, you know, like let's collaborate and let's do it. I've had a couple people that are like, I want to do the podcast. Like my friend Riley, who came on and talked about, you know, he's just not a super well-known guy, but he came on and talked about, you know, just living with mental illness, and that was such an incredible experience for me. So those are the kind of examples that I have when I want to bring people on and just continue to grow that audience.
Yeah. And what do you want people to take away from your podcast? What's the experience? You know, there's so many podcasts in every corner of every app. There's a podcast for everything, which we kind of talked about on your show. But when people come to take them to church, they listen to 5 episodes. What do you want them to kind of feel afterwards?
I want them to feel that they can maybe learn something from somebody else, that they're not alone in a certain circumstance, or to help them gather kind of knowledge about something that they're interested in. Usually, for the most part, if there's a particular person on the episode or a topic that we're covering, somebody's specifically interested in that. Like somebody that, like recently, I sat down with Matt Preston, who owns Colorado Nutrition. And I have people now that come to me and go, hey, I listened to that episode solely because I'm interested in changing the way I eat. And that was a really great experience for them. So there's an that's kind of what I gather is, you know, at the end of the day, if you get like a little bit of enjoyment, out of it, I hope you like listening to it, but you learn something along the way. That's important to me too. And
being a podcaster yourself, now author of 2 shows, what are some of the inspirations that led you to becoming a podcaster? What are some of your favorites out there?
Ooh, so the one that really led me to doing the kind of the decompression session based thing was I really loved the TED Radio Hour and their deep dives on like their topics and their conversations. Pod Save America is a really good one. Stuff You Should Know did a podcast. I mean, there's like a bunch of really cool things that I was just like, hey, you know, I would really love to do that. And then, you know, everybody and their mother listens to, it feels like, to Joe Rogan and his podcast. And I gathered a lot of like getting to talk to interesting people, and he learns so much just by proxy to being in the same conversations to these individuals, that I was like, hey, let's do that.
Yeah, I feel like regardless of who you are, how you vote, what you consider yourself on the political spectrum, social spectrum, financial income, that people could enjoy Joe Rogan. I feel like it is just like universally enjoyable, because you may hate one guest he has on and the next one might be someone that you've looked up to your whole life. And just the repertoire, I mean, has over 1,300 episodes, and a lot of people come on more than once, and Neil deGrasse Tyson's been on there more than one time. And I mean, you just talk about what a library of conversations that people can go through.
Absolutely. And they're hours long too. That's the cool thing about that Inspired, like when I do my podcast, the unedited aspect of it, just like the raw conversation is, I wanted, if you listen to the podcast, to feel like you were in that conversation and I'm not cutting things out. I want you to be able to go, it was like if you were listening to it and you closed your eyes, you're sitting in the same room as me, like chatting with so-and-so. And that's what Joe inspires to do with his stuff is, I want you to feel like, you know, there is no filter here. This is just what that person is, and I'm not going to cut it in any way, shape, or form.
Right. And then what else do you do outside of podcasting?
So for a real person job that I do, because podcasting has not taken over yet, I'm a software test engineer and a government contractor.
So I have no idea what that means at all. So get into the weeds of that.
So being a software test engineer, my job is people pass along like software engineers or developers that write code, and then they develop these tools or whatever they're going to build. They pass it to me, and then I take that and I run it through the ringer, make sure it works, try to break their stuff, help them find and refine and fix things, and then we push out products to people.
Very cool. And you said that you listen to the More You NoCo on the way to work.
I do.
Yeah. And do any episodes jump out to you, or people that you've enjoyed from the show, or just something that you enjoy about the podcast?
We talked about this before when we were doing my show, but I enjoy musical guests on your show, mostly because they're musicians that I've never really heard of a lot of the times. And you know, featuring their songs and samples in there, I get a really cool glimpse of what that's like, and to hear the backstory of what it was, you know, a different style of band. Maybe this one makes, you know, kind of more an EDM style group, and this one's more of like a rock style group or whatever. I think those are the most interesting things to me, because I love art, and so that's kind of a cool form of art for me.
What I tried to do with the guests on the show is have such a variability that people could drop in and say, well, I'm looking for X, but what about this? And they just find like every episode is so different from the next, to just bring in multiple people. Because there have been some guests that are not from Northern Colorado, but a majority of them live, work, and are a part of the NoCo community.
And that's that's really cool. Like even that, that from guest to guest, and I'm sure even if you have the same guest on twice, you're never getting that same experience. And that's what I've learned too, having talked to these people after the fact, that if I sat down and I had the same guests on again, we would have a completely different conversation. And that's such a cool thing about doing podcasting.
Yeah, you mentioned musicians. I stumbled upon this musician thing and I was like, why hadn't I thought of this sooner? And then I had some musicians on and I didn't feature their work. And I was like, oh, I really messed up. And so I kind of thought, oh, why don't I open and close every episode that features a musician with their music? Like, what a great way to plug their music. And I really, really hope that people have listened to the More You NoCo. They heard the track and they went and downloaded it on Spotify. Or best effort, they went and bought it on iTunes or Bandcamp or whatever.
Yeah, definitely contribute to your local artists there. If you enjoy the episode or like the music that they're putting out there, help them out. Same with like local artists too. Always do your best to kind of give back to those people.
Right. And episode 61, which was recent, a brand new beat, was a guy who I saw live at the Moxie and overnight became one of my favorite artists. I mean, I'm talking like maybe top 20 of all time. Like, seriously. And I'm not fluffing. That's exactly what I said in my intro. And I chased him down. We lost contact for like 6 weeks. And I finally got him on the show. And that was like such a big deal because I'd interviewed some musicians before who I hadn't spoken to before or I hadn't seen them play live. And he was someone that as soon as he got done with his first song, I was like, this needs to be on the show. And we finally got him.
I would be in the same boat. Like, there are so many people that I'm like, oh, I want you on this show so bad. Like, come on, just do it. Just do the show.
Yeah, how has that been, trying to recruit people? And now that your podcast is growing, trying to get new people. And we talked about before, a lot of people who have been on your show so far are people you knew. They're in your network. And now you're starting to drop off that ladder and bring strangers into the fold. Mm-hmm. What's that like?
It's a really great conversation with people. Like, I think people are super open to it when I reach out to them and I want to talk to them about, what they do or what they've been through. The hardest part of it all is scheduling. That is what I have found to be, because it's not always the most poignant point of conversation. I'm shooting an email back and forth with somebody. It's not like a buddy of mine that I can just shoot a text to and be like, hey, we're doing a podcast at 3:00 on this day. I kind of have to coordinate out. So I'm learning to kind of budget and plan my time frame a little bit better. That's been the struggle for me.
Yeah, because I'm sure you work full time.
I do.
And you can't just randomly take off work when you need to for a podcast.
No, if the guest was interesting enough, I probably would.
Calling a sick day.
I'm like, hey, I'm not coming in today because I got important people to talk to.
That's right. Elon Musk has all of a sudden said he wants to be on the Take Him to Church podcast.
I'll give up a whole week. I don't care. I'll call him and be like, hey, listen, I ain't going to be here all week. That's the way it's going to go.
Right. Was there any method to the madness for stopping, focusing on decompression session and heading towards Take Him to Church? Or are you just kind of juggling both because you enjoy aspects of both? What is the story there?
I enjoy aspects of both. The decompression session just kind of got put on a little bit of hold because Kyle and I schedules are just a little bit conflicting. So it's always hard to get together to do the pieces we want to do. Because when we set out to do those episodes initially, I think the first couple episodes, if you go and listen to them, are like an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes. Like, they're long because we're just sitting there talking about topics and we go into it with like a little bit of research and deep dive. We did a whole episode talking about like the Space Force and like understanding what that whole concept means, like what a meme on the internet. But there's so much to unravel from that topic. And so now I'm trying to juggle a little bit of both, but taking them to church is a little bit easier because I'm in control of my own schedule. And then I can, focus on the other one on the side.
So you've recorded 9 episodes of Take Him to Church. Has it been any different than you expected, sitting down with people that you may or may not have known very well and having these 1-hour conversations about their lives?
Yeah, you learn a lot about people. You might expect something to be where, you necessarily don't. Like my friend Angie that was on last week. She came on to talk about her mission trip to Ghana. And I haven't really spoken to her. I mean, we talk here and there, but I hadn't seen her in like 4 to 6 years. And we just hit it off and we're chit-chatting and talking I hang out with her all the time. And then people that are like my own sister that came in and she did an episode talking about her battle with alcoholism. Like, I was learning things about my own sister that had never been shown to me before, and she's been my sister, my whole life. So,
why do you think that is, that you have people sit down with you here in your home on the podcast, and you get a different glimpse of them other than if you hadn't?
I think it just boils down to sometimes people are never put in this situation. They never have a chance where they're being asked about their story. You might get asked, like, hey, how's your day? But you never get asked, like, what made you, like, get to this point? Like, you're the first person to ask about why I picked that logo. Like nobody just questioned. Everybody just was like, okay, he's doing tigers, I guess. Like that's cool, good for him. But like,
take him to church. Here's a tiger.
There's a deeper meaning there, and if people put in the time to ask me, I'll tell you all day. So I think it's just getting used to having that kind of that discussion. And my sister and I have always been like not the closest, but I learned a lot from her when we got to sit down and just talk about her issues for once.
I sound like such a Coloradan when I say this, but I often choose for an activity with a friend or a group of friends to go to a brewery. Mm-hmm. Go out and get a drink. And a lot of people might look at that surface level and say, oh, Ivan wants to go drink. What I want to do is get us all in a space where we're sitting down in the same environment and we're present and we're having these conversations where it goes past how was your day, and we get to actually hear people's stories, hear what's on their mind, something you never knew about them, and just kind of considerations that you never would have had if you didn't intentionally go to a place where there's also delicious beer.
Yeah, when you sit down, like we live in a day and age of instant communication, text messaging, phone calls, Facebook. Like there's so many opportunities for people to talk to each other, and it's so rare anymore that we go out and we just have those genuine human conversations with people. Look at like current dating in today's day and age. I feel like a majority of times I hear about how people met online is through online, but like Tinder or like Bumble, like an application where I had no human contact. Like I remember when people had to go out and like to the bar and meet people. Like that's how if you want genuine human connection, just go out and make time. You don't even have to go to a brewery if you don't drink. Just go sit down. Like, hey man, I just want to go. Let's go for a walk and talk.
Right.
I'm always down for that.
It's scary though, right? To walk into a place, maybe by yourself or with another, and to meet random people. We're always worried about what we're going to say. Am I going to trip over this? Are they going to find me interesting? And I'm not even talking about the dating scene. I'm just like making friends at a card shop or talking to someone, at a brewery. Like I wish people felt bolder to just strike up a conversation. And what it always comes down to and reminds me of is when you get on an airplane, there are two kinds of people. There are those who don't want to be bothered, and there are those who want to talk to you and chat with you through the entire flight. And by the time the plane is backing up onto the runway, you know who everybody is.
No, and that's, I was for a long time, option A there. I just kind of put my headphones in. I was like, all right, leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you. Like, let me get my noise-canceling Bose headphones out and just not deal with anybody. But then the more I realized it, the more I got out into the world, I love talking to people. Because there's so many interesting and great conversations that have been had and things that have been, relationships that have been struck up because of those conversations that I have grown to appreciate them at a much higher level. So now I think I'm the latter.
Right. Yeah, you reminded me of a meme I actually saw where it took a photo of like in 2018 and everyone's on the subway on their phones. Nobody's talking. But then it shows a photo from like the 1950s. It's the same thing, but everyone's reading the paper.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, so this isn't new. I mean, imagine living in a place like New York City where there's that many people. If you tried to strike up a conversation with everyone at every place, every subway ride, every taxi ride, walking down the street, every coffee shop, every corner, you're going to be exhausted. Even if you're the most extroverted person in the world and you love meeting new people, you're going to get exhausted. That's too many people. We're not capable of meaningfully interacting with thousands of individuals.
And we're also kind of caught up in having been in New York, like myself, and lived in that experience. It's a different feeling. You're surrounded by millions of people. You walk down the street. I've never been in a city where I could be so surrounded by people but feel so isolated at the same time, because it's everybody's so focused on themselves that you oftentimes don't stop to think about what the person that walked past you is doing or what's going on. Like, you're at a coffee shop and you're waiting in line and the person in front of you is upset. Well, like there's a reason that they're upset. There's a backstory to everything. Every interaction you have, somebody has a life that spirals off into a million other events. And when you stop to sit there and like isolate yourself, you can kind of feel how disconnected we all are. But at the same time, if you just take the time to maybe break that barrier down a little bit and have that conversation, there's so many good things that can come of it.
I mean, how many times have we had a random conversation with a person and we walked away feeling empowered? We feel great. We have a smile on our face, and it was someone we didn't plan. We didn't wake up that day knowing that we were going to have that conversation, but it made us feel better. We just enjoy that human connection, whatever it may be. And it could be something random, totally random. But I think we've all felt that moment where we had an unplanned interaction, and because it was personal and meaningful in some way, that it felt great. And it doesn't mean you're going to remember it a year from now, but we had talked about on your show that I think a valuable lesson for all of us is that at the crux of human experience and memory and meaning in life, it's that it comes down to people. And I think that's really what your podcast is trying to do, is instill that and remind people that it's stories, and it's the people who are sitting right next to you or the person on the other end of that tweet that matters.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really good things that can come of those interactions with people. I mean, I've always come from the mindset of, your interactions with people do matter. Whether you think like the 30 seconds you spend ordering at a counter is important or not, like at a restaurant, or like if you're getting like a drive-through window and you're going to go get fast food, those a couple of seconds matter, because that could define somebody's whole day. Maybe I'm having a rotten day sitting behind the counter at my job, and nobody has even cared, what's going on in my life. And I have a stranger come up to me and go like, hey, how's your day going? Like, wow, that's such a huge thing. Just to have somebody ask me, genuinely, that they care about what I have going on. Or in another instance, if they compliment you. I love walking up and just complimenting people on stuff. Like, hey, man, that's a cool jacket. Or I want to know about people's tattoos when I see tattoos, because I'm like, there's a deeper meaning there somewhere. Maybe there's not, but that's totally cool. I'm striking up a conversation because I find you interesting and I want to know more about you. And I may never see you again, but that impression, that 30 seconds may carry with you and make or break your whole day, and you might remember that weeks from now. I don't ever know.
Have you had that reaction from some of your guests on the show? Like, Nick, thank you so much. You made me feel heard, and you gave me a voice I didn't have before.
No, I definitely. When I had my friend Riley on to talk about his mental illness, that is something that, it's always this hush-hush taboo thing, and you always just kind of hear about people that struggle with that kind of thing. And he's struggled with bipolarism and schizoaffective disorder, which are big time issues. And he was just so open and honest, and you could tell just as he spoke that he was just so happy that he got to share his story with people, because for a long time he had to keep it quiet. He was so afraid of what people would think of him for sharing that. But now that he shares it, I get so many comments from people about wow, that was so powerful, and I had no idea that, because if you meet him, you'd have no idea that this is even going on in his life. And that for me is a hugely meaningful thing.
Yeah. Have you had any reactions, or what reactions have you had from people who listened to your show and they reached out to you about their reaction?
So I'll have people come on and talk to me about hey, that nutrition conversation you had really sparked an interest in me to go think about how I'm going to eat. I'm going to change my diet a little bit. I had a clinical psychologist on that talked about, going out and getting issues addressed. And I've had people go, hearing Megan talk, that was so eye-opening to me that I can go out and I can get this help. And, if I want to get into this field, this is how I do it. People have come to me that I never would have thought, coworkers and family friends and people I haven't seen in years, or strangers online. They'll come and they'll just be like, hey, I really enjoyed that. And, you keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. As you look to the next 50-ish, 100-ish episodes, however many, how do you think about who should be on the show?
I look about a lot at what they're going to bring as their own interest in their stories. I want to know more about stuff. A lot of it's kind of my own selfish kind of nitpicking. But for the most part, I won't skim away. If you come to me and you're genuine about wanting to do the podcast, let's do it, man. I'm excited. Let's talk about it. Even if you have, you work at McDonald's and you don't do anything, I would love to just chat about your life with you, because that may be the only chance you ever get in your life. But I have big topics and names and things that people I want to talk to. And maybe someday I'll get there. We never know. But for now, it's, hey, let's take this one day at a time, and whoever wants to come talk, let's talk about it, and I'm sure someone will appreciate it.
Well, it's everyone's stories matter. I think somewhere along the ways, for some reason, we stratify social worth, and we think that some people's stories are less told, or some people's stories should be less told, and that's not the case. Regardless of what you do, how much money you make, where you come from, what type of education you have, there's something in your life that you've experienced that we could glean from and learn from, or just getting the time to hear from that person has value in it. So that really resonates with me when you say that anyone could come on the show, because that's what I've always felt about this show, The More You NoCo. It's people have asked me, who would you not have on the show? And I think, I don't know. I don't know that answer exists. I think that unless there was just absolutely some vicious blocking reason, that anyone should be on the show, because there is every kind of person in Northern Colorado. And a lot of them don't get their stories told. And I wish that they would. And I'm out there looking for those people.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat with you when it comes to that stuff. It's, at the end of the day, I want everybody that has a chance to get out there, whether I agree with you politically, socially, whatever. I mean, I don't care. There are times that I wish I could talk to people that I couldn't stand, just because I want to understand where they're coming from. You know, where does that instance drive you from? Like, I hate the Westboro Baptist Church people, like the people that picket funerals, hate them. I would, you know, if you gave me 30 seconds of time to sit down and talk to them about, like, where does this come from? Let's talk about it. I may not agree with you, and I still may hate you, but at least now I have an understanding of exactly where you're coming from. And then same with somebody that, like, you know, Joe Schmo on the street. Let's talk about your life. You might be the most interesting person I've ever met in my entire life, and you don't even know it yet.
Yeah, and that's what you're trying to highlight, people, regardless of their story, and you want them to come on the show, and you want people to tune in. So Take Them to Church, hosted by Nick Church, yourself. Where should people find your podcast?
So it's accessible pretty much anywhere that you can pull a podcast from. If you have an iPhone, there's a lovely podcast app. You can go on Apple Podcasts. If you're a Spotify subscriber, it's on there as well. You can go on things such as SoundCloud or YouTube, which are free internet apps, and find it there as well. I believe Google Play should work as well. So there's tons of options there. You can find us on social media. The Take 'Em to Church podcast is on Facebook. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at TETC. That's Take 'Em to Church abbreviated, in case people don't understand where that comes from. Podcast. So find us on there.
TETC podcast.
Yes, sir.
And that's how I found you. That's how we got connected, was Instagram.
What a platform.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on, and maybe we'll come back and do it again sometime.
That's right. I have some shout outs for a couple people who make this show live and breathe, making it all possible. Trevor Fossey edits, mixes, and EQs our episodes, putting the time in behind the scenes. Russell Isaac Long provides us with the wonderful music that greets and departs all our episodes here at the NoCo. It's people like these two who have made this show possible, and I thank you both very much. To stay connected with the NoCo, follow us on Instagram or Facebook at the NoCo. Original, right? Don't worry, listener. We will be back soon with another episode featuring another person or group of people. Thank you to everyone out there for listening and supporting the show and bringing our community together. Until next time, peace!